Hello everybody, welcome to my festive tech calendar 2022 video. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. I'm Ryan Murphy. So we're going to go through sensitivity labeling today, just to get to know how to create labels, how to create sublabels, how to apply those labels to items, how to build groups and sites labels out, what they mean for each of the solutions that they support. And then we'll have a quick roundup at the end. I have some additional configurations that I can show you also around encryption, permissions within labels, and so on and so forth. So let's get to it. Okay, so initially I'm going to build out just a general label. This particular label doesn't need any sublabels, so let's go with that. And this will also not include any encryption whatsoever. Within the description here, it's always better to have as much information as possible to give the user the understanding of what this particular label is for, and more importantly, what types of data it can be applied to. So let's do the same for admin. Now, when we come down to label color here, these label colors, I usually follow the traffic light system. So what that means is I would have a green color for anything that's not encrypted, or your general label. I would have amber for my confidential, which is my mid-level labeling. And then I would have red for the most severe ones, like highly confidential or secret. So let's choose green for this one. Let's select next. Okay, now, as I said, we're not going to go through any groups and sites just yet. So I'm going to untick this for now, and then select next. Okay, we don't need any encryption. We don't need any content marking. Or you may need content marking, so let's just add that in just first. Let's put a little footer at the bottom. Okay, font size is 10, font color is black, that's fine. Let's put it in the center. Select save, and then select next. We don't need any other configurations, and then through to finish. We have a quick check of our settings, of course, as always, and then we create label. Okay, at this point I'm not going to select to publish any labels. I'm going to run you through that later on. So for now I'm just going to set don't create policy yet, and then we're done. Okay, so that's our first label. So anybody that is in the labeling policy where general is located, they'll have the opportunity to apply this to non-encrypted, non-MNPI data, no data that's essentially sensitive to the business. So this is just a general label that you can apply to any documentation. So next up, let's create the confidential parent label. So you want to come in here, type in confidential, do the same, description for users, for confidential data, same for admins. And then this time we're going to pick let's go with the orange for amber, and then select next. Okay, again, we don't need groups and sites at this point. We click next. We are going to use both of these, but not for the parent label. The parent label just needs to be a container to add sublabels to. So we can go next right through to the end, and then create label. Great. And again, we don't want to create a policy just yet. Now we get into confidential. Okay, so the first one we're going to create is confidential internal. So let's do that. So we click on actions on the ellipsis, and we go to add sublabel. Now within here, we're going to type, let me remove this actually, confidential internal. Okay, and then go down, and again, for confidential internal data. Okie doke. Now you can see here we've already got the color selected because we chose that on the parent label, and then we select next. Again, we untick groups and sites. We don't need just now. And then next, now we're going to include encryption. So we're going to select this, and then we're also going to select content marking. Now we're given this encryption page here. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to make sure that the assign permissions now, I'll let users decide, is set to assign permissions now. Then when it comes to user access to content expires, we're not going to use this today or in this demo, and the same for allow offline access. Okay, but we are going to choose assign permissions to specific users and groups. So when we select this, we can essentially go up and say add all users and groups in your organization. Because this is confidential internal, that's what we would look to do. We would want anybody inside of our environment to have the ability to apply this label, but also read content that has this label applied. So let's select that. You'll see your actual domain in here. So you can select that, select save, then scroll down. Oh, we're at the bottom. We don't want to use double key encryption. We just select next at this point now that we have our internal domain and our permissions of co-author, and then we select next. Okay, we're coming to content marking. I'm going to add another footer in the center, and I'm going to type confidential internal. Then select next, and then select next again. Okay, we don't need any auto labeling, so we can skip right through to the end. Again, have a quick check of our configuration, make sure it's everything that we need. Click create label. And there we go. Again, we don't need to create a policy just yet. We're going to do that later on. And then done. And great, we have our first parent label and first sublabel categorized. Okay. Now we're going to create another label, but this label is going to be confidential, recipients only. I'll explain this as I go through it. So confidential recipients only. Okay. And again, we can see that we've already got the amber color selected because it's on the parent label. We don't need groups and sites. We do need encryption, and we do need to apply a content marking. And then we select next. Now we get the same page as we did before, of course, because we selected encryption. However, this time we're going to change assign permissions now to let users define permissions. Okay. So what this essentially means is, when the user selects this label, they'll be given a pop-up box. And within that pop-up box, they can input the SMTP addresses of the recipients that they want this label, or the label document that's been labeled with this item to. Okay. Now, additional permissions in here, we should select in Outlook, enforce one of the following restrictions. Okay. Now, usually you would want to select do not forward. If this is for only the recipients that are included in the little pop-up box, you must select do not forward if you don't want that to be forwarded on. Additionally, in Word, if you want to be able to apply those into the document itself, this box also needs to be selected. Okay, so we've changed assign permissions now to let users assign permissions. We've included Outlook and do not forward because we don't want the recipients to forward that email on, because it's only intended for those recipients. And then we've got in Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. So we know any of these Office solutions here have the ability to apply this label. Then we select next, and again I'm going to add a little footer, put it in the center, and I'm going to put confidential recipients only. Select next again. Okay, and right through to the end. Okay, great. Again, don't want to publish. So that's our first level of confidential for file and email. Okay, so this obviously means that you can only apply this label structure with these two sublabels to file and emails. Now, what we're going to do is build out confidential for groups and sites. Okay, so let's do that now. So we're going to go to create label, and we're going to have this label here called confidential, and then container labeling. Okay, and this is going to be our parent label for groups and sites. Okay, and let's just put this in here. We should have done this in the other one, so if you notice, you can go and add that back into the description. And again, we're going to choose amber. So amber or orange is our mid-level label in this demo today, so we're going to use that as our amber for the traffic light system. Green for general, amber for confidential, red or burgundy for highly confidential. We're going to select next. Okay, we're going to select groups and sites, and we're going to go all the way to the end and create that label. Do not publish. Okay, then we're going to go with this label. We're going to click on the ellipsis. Going to click on the ellipsis and then add a sub label. Now within this one, we're going to call this confidential internal container labeling. Okay, same for your admins. Again, we have the colors already pre-selected from the parent label. We're going to tick items this time and just continue with groups and sites. Okay, there is no encryption required, or no encryption enabled, should I say, and then we've got no content marking. But as you can see here, we do have some options coming up for groups and sites. Okay, so at this particular level, what we're going to choose is privacy and external access settings, okay, and then external sharing and conditional access settings, and I'll show you what those do when we get through to there. So on this particular screen here, because this is for your just internal teams only, okay, we're going to set this privacy to private, so only team owners and members can access this group. Okay, so essentially what that means is when you mark it as private, this particular sentence here matches the configuration that you're looking for. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're not going to select external access because again this is just an internal label, so we're going to ignore this particular option here. Then we're going to select both of these. Okay, now within both of these we're going to select the only people in your organization, because this is an internal label. We don't want anybody outside having access to this information. And then if anybody joins with an unmanaged device, okay, you have some additional options here to choose from. Now again, because this is internal and this shouldn't be shared with anybody externally, we're going to select block access. Okay, so we don't want any communications from any unmanaged devices allowed access into our internal SharePoint site or our internal Teams channels or whatever the case may be. Okay, then we're going to select next. We don't need any of these options here, and then through to finish, and then review our settings within here. Okay, and then simply create the label. Again, don't publish. Straight back to the main screen. So now we've got confidential for file and email as a structure, and now we're building a structure now for confidential container level labeling. So we've got any site now, team site or SharePoint site, can be configured to use confidential internal, container labeling. Okay, so this can be applied to a SharePoint site. So if there's any information in that SharePoint site that must be labeled as confidential internal, okay, you can label that site. then consequently you can label the items within that site with this particular confidential internal label. Okay, so let's build out our second label. Okay, and then this particular label, what we're going to do is we're going to say this is confidential external, but we're going to have some limited sharing on this particular one. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so let's populate our naming in here. And again, as always, we've got the label color pre-selected. And then we need to untick items here. And then we're just onto groups and sites. We select next. Now again, with groups and sites, as I say, there's no encryption available and there's no content marking because this is particularly at the site, groups and teams channel level. Then we come through to here. We want to select both of these options again. Now, on this part here, what we're going to do is we're going to change the settings a little bit. So let's just take a quick look through. We're going to choose private as we did previously. But on the next one here, when we choose these, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, well, because this is external and we want to allow some limited sharing, I'm going to say new and existing guests, okay? Or you could choose existing guests, all right? But for this particular demo here, because I see this most frequently used, I'm going to say new and existing guests, but on this next option here, use Azure AD conditional access to protect labels SharePoint sites, I'm actually going to select allow limited or web only access. Now this means anybody coming in who's a new or an existing user that is not part of your environment and they're using an unmanaged device, they will have some visibility into the content within that SharePoint site. However, it will only be limited. Now, if I click on the little eye information here, it shows you that users on managed devices will have browser-only access to the labels site with no ability to download, print, or sync files. They will also won't be able to access content through apps, including Office apps. Okay? So it's web access only. So when they log into a Word document or a PDF, they're going to get that up in a browser. And that browser is pretty much locked down. They can't do anything with it. So if you want your customer or your regulator or third party or whomever or whatever it may be to have access, but to only have limited access, these are your options here. Okay? Then we're going to select next and then next again. And again, we're going to review our settings right the way through to the end and then create label. Again, we don't need to create a policy. We just select done. All right, excellent. So we've got two nice structures for confidential for file and email and confidential for container labeling. Okay. Now it's important that these are bundled together underneath each other. So as you can see here, you have an order of label. Okay. So general is your lowest. That means it's the least sensitive. And then at the moment we have 6, which is the highest, which is going to change soon because we're going to build out some highly confidential labels. But should anybody have these the other way round, you won't be able to get any information or any alerting from when a document is added to a site. Okay, so I'll go into this a little bit more detail, but for now, make sure you build your confidential and confidential container level labeling in subsequent to each other. So let's build out some highly confidential item level, aka file and email labels. Okay, so highly confidential. And again, this is our parent label, so we need to select, oh, if I can spell confidential properly. Right, this time we're going to select the red, even though it's burgundy. So let's select this. So we now know that any data or any label where we see this red marker, we know that's our most severe data in the environment. So let's select next. Okay, we click on items only, so we've only got items. We're going to do groups and sites in just a moment. We select next. We don't need any any additional configuration just yet, because we're going to apply that to our sublabels. Come all the way through, save our label, check our label first rather, and then create the label. And then again, we don't want to publish just yet. We're going to do that later on. And then select done. Come down to the highly confidential label, parent label we just created, okay? And then go to actions and then click sublabel. Now in here, we want to call this highly confidential internal, okay? So let's take that opportunity to do that. Internal. Oh. And of course, our label color is already pre-selected. We're going to untick groups and sites. We're going to come in here again and select these two options. We want to imply encryption because this is just for internal people, so we want to make sure the permissions honor that. And then we've got apply content marking, just so we can give that indication on the actual document. And we'll change the color on this one. So again, we've come through to the encryption page. We've got assign permissions now. I'll let user decide. No, we need to decide them now, and we're going to do that in a moment. We're not going to change any of these two options here, but we are going to go to assign permissions and then select all users and groups in your organization. And again, you'll come through with your actual domain, not your vanity domain. So if you see the on Microsoft address, that is correct. You don't need to be freaked out. Your vanity domain won't appear here. And then select save. We come down and we check the settings. Okay, we've got co-author inside of here, and then we're going to select next. Come into content marking. We choose a footer, but this time we're going to change it to red. Because it's our most severe labels, highly confidential, we want that indication on the actual documents and emails themselves. So we want to give the indication that, hey, this is highly confidential. Are you sure this data matches that? Okay. Now, we're going to type in here, highly confidential internal. Okay. And let's make it the same as the label. And let's select next. And again, next, we don't need any auto labeling. We've got nothing to configure on groups and sites. We've got no schematized data assets. We can come through. Again, always review your settings and then create label. Again, we don't need to publish just yet. And straight through onto highly confidential. All right, excellent. So we've got highly confidential internal. So let's build out now a highly confidential recipients only. So again, add sublabel. Highly confidential, but this time it's going to be recipients only. Same for here, same for here. And again, as we have it, label color already applied. We remove groups and sites for now. We come through, we want encryption, we want to apply content marking, and then into next. Now again, as you remember on the confidential recipients only, we swap this around to let users assign permissions. So let's do that now. Again, we need the Outlook. We don't want the recipients to forward this because we've named it recipients only or user defined permissions. We select do not forward, but we do want this in Word. We do want to be able to apply those encryptions to documents as well. Select next. We do want content marking. And again, let's come down here, put it to center, make it red. And then we can type in confidential recipients only. Highly confidential recipients only, should I say. And then select next. No auto labeling needed, no groups and sites information, no schematized data. Come through and review. And then create label. Don't need to publish just yet. And then we're done. All right, excellent. So now we've got our highly confidential file and email label setup. And as you can see now, we've gone from 6 to 9 in the labeling priority. Now we're going to create a label for container level labeling for highly confidential. So let's do that. Oh, we don't need to do that, sorry. Okie doke. So in here, we're going to call this container labeling. Now we're only going to create one sublabel for this. Because this is our most severe data, we don't want this to be shared outside. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply groups and sites in just a moment, but we're going to block all types of sharing, just like we did with the confidential internal one. So let's go through. This is our parent label. Okay, don't need to publish just yet. All right, and then if we come through here and add sublabel, at this point we're going to say highly confidential internal. Okay, and then down to here. All right, and then let me just double check that. Oh, I missed the container level labeling off, so let me just add that in. All right, great. And again, as always, we've got the color there. Right, and this time we're going to need groups and sites. We need both of these selected. We're going to put to private on this page, and then on define external sharing conditions, we're going to set to only people in your organization and block access. Again, because this is our most severe data, we don't want this to be able to be shared or anybody to have access to this from external. Okay, so we're essentially putting these settings on here to prevent that from happening. Then we can select next, review our settings again, and then create label. Okay, don't create policy just yet, and select done. So next we're going to create a labeling policy. So we've got our structure there, okay, and as we can see now we're on label priority 10. Okay, so let's go to label policies and create a label policy just for our file and email. And we're going to split out file and email and groups and sites. And there's a reason for that. And I'll go into that when I get to the labeling policy for groups and sites. So let's select publish label. Okay, choose the sensitivity labels we want to apply. So we want general, confidential, confidential internal, confidential recipients only. We also want highly confidential internal, and highly confidential recipients only. So we're leaving behind our container level labeling. We select next, okay, and then we choose all users. So we want all users to have access to all of these labels, okay? Then we select next. Now, here's some interesting settings. You can say users must provide a justification to remove a label or lower it for classification. This is good practice to do. If somebody has a document that's labeled highly classified and they drop down the label to general, you'd want to know why that happened. Why would that declassification happen? Okay. Then you've got require users to apply a label to their emails and documents. Again, good practice to have on, so you can always have a label applied to documentation, so it's easily to manage and easily to audit. Require users to apply a label to the Power BI. We're not going to go into this today. And additionally, Microsoft gives you the ability to apply a link. So if you have a help page at all on your intranet or wherever it may be hosted from, you can actually give some training material or understanding of what these sensitivity labels are for within that link, which is displayed to them within the label, which is really good. Then we're going to select next. So when we come to default label, okay, we're just going to select general. All right, because that's our lowest level label. We're going to apply that by default. Okay, and that's for our documents. And then for emails, we're going to say same as document, requires users to apply a label to their emails. So that's exactly what we want. We want to be able to ensure that users are using the labels. And then next we can skip Power BI. And then in name, we're just going to call this global file and email policy. Okay, and then within the description we can say contains all file and email labels. Default label general. And then select next. Let's have a quick look at our configuration and then press submit. Excellent. So now we have a new policy created, okay? But do note, this is very important. I see a lot of people creating label policies and then within 30 minutes trying to test those policies out. Now, my personal experience, I haven't seen it take 24 hours, but I have seen it take, you know, a few hours, 4, 6 hours or whatever the case may be. So just bear this in mind. Then select done. So we have our first policy, okay? So let's now create our second policy for groups and sites. This time I'm going to choose the groups and sites labels. So container level labeling. And then down here to these two. All right. And then we select next. Okay. Now on here, okay, what you want to do is pull out your admins. Now, the reason for this is if a user is an owner of a site or a Teams channel, they do have the ability to take the label off. Your business requirements may not allow that. So you would want to limit the ability to apply these labels at the groups and sites, aka the container levels, to a number of people. Okay? Therefore, once that label is applied, any team owners or channel owners can then not take that label off, do whatever they want to exfiltrate data and circumvent that control, and then apply the label back on. So we're just going to choose this tenant's default tenants administrator. So we're going to say this moderator here and then select next. Okay, we're not going to apply any information here. Okay, we're not going to apply any default label, and we're going to name this global policy containing labeling. Only admins. Okay, have a quick check of our configuration and then select submit. And again, as it states here, with all new policies it can take up to 24 hours, and then we press done. Okay, excellent. So now we've got all of our labels configured for our file and email and for groups and sites and our labeling policy. Okay, great. So I've waited a couple of hours now, and then I'm going to come back and just show you within the Word document where the labels can be applied. So within the Word document here, you have at the top this little box with sensitivity on in the ribbon. Okay, now we can see the labels that we've configured. Okay, this gives you the opportunity then to understand what labels are there. Okay, and additionally also within email itself, we've got a little pop out here that we can use, and we've also got the same box here for sensitivity labels. So that's the labels then deployed. So I hope you've enjoyed my sensitivity labeling getting to know video today for Festive Tech Calendar 22. There is going to be some links throughout the Festive Tech Calendar pages and videos for your contribution to the charity that they run. I myself have included some charitable donation into that. I'd encourage you to do so also if you like these videos that are going to be over the next few weeks. Thank you for having me. I've been Ryan John Murphy. Enjoy your Christmas. Enjoy the holidays. Thanks again. Bye-bye.